Craig Henry, U.S. Industry Manager of Intralogistics at Siemens, also a leader, a visionary leader in the intralogistics and automated supply chain space. Craig, the goal for all companies in the fulfillment centers and warehouse space should be smart manufacturing and really bringing in automation and the material flow, which is adaptable to changing market, technology conditions, and the like, but really diving into the intralogistics industry specifically. 2022 saw the industry valued at $47 billion, and it's predicted to triple over the next several years to $145 billion by 2030. Walk us through, what are the driving factors behind the forecasted growth, and where do you see most investments being made? Maybe some initial investments, but even perhaps longer term investments being made.
Well, that's a big question. Thanks for having me on this. This is fun. I like to talk. It's been said. I see this thing, and having been in automation my whole career, what started out as being let's make things move faster and more efficiently. That's purely automation. That's been happening for decades. In this space, 2022 saw great investment, huge record-breaking warehouse automation expenditures, capital expenditures to automate the movement of goods. What we've seen is the transition from let's make it go faster, or let's just make the bottleneck faster, to let's create what I define as essentially a giant vending machine, an entire end-to-end automation that not only is efficient, but has what you just mentioned, agility and flexibility, so that as demand changes, vendors change, the product mix will change, that the system will be agile enough and have optionality. That's the main reason that digitalization needs to happen in this industry. It's not just because it's new techie and it's exciting and, hey, we want to have a lot in the cloud, et cetera. It's because we don't know what the future holds. And we have this double this double problem of demand being uncertain, because it always is, but now vendors are uncertain. The supply chain has become very uncertain. And with those degrees of freedom, we have to have a system that can quickly change, and optimization's out the window. Optimization presumes there's going to be a best way of doing things, and the best way of doing things is going to change so much that optimization needs to be thrown out the window. So that's, in a nutshell, what I see happening as far as technology. Another piece of this is the labor problem. The way that the Western, particularly Western culture, has moved, jobs that are dull, dirty, and dangerous are not going to be jobs that people are going to want to do, and there's going to be a gap there. There was a labor gap before COVID. Almost 70% is what I read of companies felt that they couldn't find all the talent they needed pre-COVID. Now, it may not have been as severe, but it was already there. Then COVID hits, then everyone retreats into safety. And in the United States, I think the number was like 19 million. There was a huge number of baby boomers who said, yeah, we're done. We're going to go home. Not going to work no more. And so you compound all this together and you have this huge gap. And the bottom line, I say all that to say, we must automate, because it's the only way we're going to get the job done and make sure that we can meet the demand, especially for seasonal business like retail when Christmas comes around. That's something that there will be a lot of unhappy people on Christmas Day if we don't automate. It's just absolutely going to be a problem. So that's it. You mentioned about investment, and what I've referred to as the catnip of investors has been robotics for a while, but those numbers are way down now, like half of what they were a year ago. It doesn't mean there isn't going to be investment in robotics specifically. It's just that there's going to be a lot more vetting, and you can't have a company that's just sold $500,000 worth of equipment being valued at $20 million anymore. You've got to do your due diligence, and there's definitely going to be a future for some of these, but it's not as rich a field as it was. But I believe very strongly that robotics, which is a very broad term, by the way, is going to continue to be an essential tool for intralogistics. It's going to, the numbers are not wrong. In fact, they're probably still conservative as to how we're going to be utilizing robotic technology, and then subsequently coupling that with AI to do optimization. So that's my giant answer. But you have a very, very big question there, Brandon. So your fault.
Well, you had a really good answer. I think we talked about catnip. We talked about Santa Claus.
Good.
We talked about really this even bigger looming problem of just a labor gap, a labor shortage, and a lot of folks simply just called it a day once the pandemic started. And we've got our own epidemic here in the space where labor just isn't there. So we must automate. We must bring in smart manufacturing, smart, intelligent, even AI into the process to make things work and really catch up with demand and be ready for that. So you even mentioned a lot of investment. You mentioned investment being down nearly half. You've also got a lot of layoffs from tech giants. I'm curious, how maybe that tech layoff area, maybe we could not reskill, but bring some fresh ideas or new perspectives into our space here to help with that labor gap. What are your thoughts
I think
there?
that's a great idea, and I think that has happened with the. What is the number? I hate to give a number for the tens of thousands that were laid off in the last several months from Google, Amazon, Facebook, et cetera. That those workers are valuable, and that our industry of intralogistics, and these are the solution providers, software, hardware, that in bringing those, absorbing that talent is going to be a great coup for this industry, because we're seeing with technologies we're coming out with that there's the bleeding edge of what's next, and which would be edge computing, AI, moving up into PC and then to the cloud with control systems. We need that in this industry, and I have seen that. So that's a fact that is happening. I don't see doom and gloom for high tech. I think it's a matter of just resizing and being agile. And when it's not a, hey, this is the beginning of the end, or this is a bad situation for folks like Amazon. Amazon was announced 18,000 layoff. They have 1.5 million employees. Now, 18,000 is a giant number, but it doesn't indicate any kind of lack of health. It just means they're shifting and reorganizing and becoming more globally centered than regionally centered in their approach. And there's just a lot of things going on in the high tech world. But that's the beauty of the the Adam Smith invisible hand of commerce. Everything right sizes in a free market, and so there's lots of opportunity right now. In fact, I would say that I like to bring this quote up. This is something John Battles at Amazon said at Material Handling Conference 2021. He said that this is an exciting time in the sense that it is a renaissance of technology right now. That there are things happening at a rate and new technologies coming out so quickly that we have all kinds of new jobs, all kinds of new ways that we can add value as workers in this space. And I think that he's right. I like to use that term, a renaissance, because being a nerd myself, I'm an engineer, and I pretty much knew I was going to be an engineer when I was about 8 and playing with my Lego and stuff, that I wanted to know how everything worked and wanted to build things. And it just was a thing. So I love that we're in this time, and it is an exciting time. We are in an industry 4.0 revolution. Even though, yes, we're in a recession. Yeah, there's some headwinds, but that's just the way of the world. That's always going to be the case. So,
Craig, you mentioned bleeding edge technology, and you mentioned even some really amazing projects on the forefront going forward. Let's talk about this idea of how companies can begin this journey. We can talk about the digital twin and simulation technologies and having a strategy first. We can talk about that side of the spectrum. And then from there, let's go to the bleeding edge and give us a little insight into what is next for those companies that everyone else is inevitably going to follow behind.
Yes, that's the broad spectrum of it. I am a big believer that you should strategize before you digitalize. And that gets back to the simple mathematics of customer service and knowing your lead times for product coming in, knowing variability, knowing what kind of safety stock you should have. If you're going for 94% customer service, 90%, whatever it is, that is mathematics that you need to do. And then the mathematics of how your distribution channel works. If you're just a single center, great. But if you have a master distribution, then through hubs, there's math that you can do there. And it's math that's been around for a long, long time. So you got to get your strategy right to understand where it is you want to be performance-wise and what your dashboard needs to look like to make sure that happens. Then you go in and reach into the bag of all the whippy great tools that we have in the form of hardware and software that can make that happen. And I think that there's a lot being talked about with respect to neural networks, machine learning, AI, and digitalization. And it all sounds good. And even from boardrooms, these words are echoing. But what do they really do, and what do they really mean? We're not going to cover all that in this podcast, but what we're moving toward is that you have visibility all through the organization, and that you're able to digest down and concentrate down the specific metrics that you want to indicate the health of what your organization is doing. And that's where you're going to find that having, as we've been talking about for years now, the Internet of Things, that connectivity right down to each machine, each sortation system, each belt sorter, gapper, whatever you've got in your facility, that the metrics from that are being monitored, and you can see the exceptions, or you see the overall effectiveness of this machinery. And if you don't have that connectivity, that's a good place to start. If you haven't got any automation, and I did just do a training in Detroit last week, and a gentleman came in and he was looking at a drive system, and we were talking about it, and I asked him about their automation, and he said he didn't have any. And I thought, you know what, that's probably more the norm. He had people driving fork trucks, getting stuff with a paper rider, and he would go, his folks would go and get stuff, and they had it was a textile and like paper type distribution center. And that was that. And I had to step back for a second, because I'm steeped in all this tech all the time, and go, okay, where does that guy start? And it was really first, how do you run it? And it gets back to, does your software, does your warehouse execution or warehouse management system do what you need it to do? And so, I mean, I think that there is this huge spectrum. And I think from the statistics I've read, that warehouses aren't even 10% automated in the United States. And so that indicates that there's a huge benefit and probably optimization of the space and the people that can be done through automation and technology. So the other part of your question was how, what is at the bleeding edge? The companies that I know of that are really going to the highest end that I see today are companies whereby they have systems that are connected all the way from a retail perspective, the consumer with a handheld app and the decisions they make on the app filtering through to a centralized system, cloud-based, of course, that will watch their behaviors, see what products of interest are there, will manage inventory locations based on the kind of heat map of what customer interest is, have their automatic storage retrieval systems throughout a geography with the proper product to be able to meet the expected need and the real need, and that those systems are then connected through artificial intelligence to watch for patterns and suggest new ways of stocking that product. AI is another term that I think we make it more space science than it needs to be. Artificial intelligence is using a computer to look for patterns, and you program it to do that and to then make decisions on what it sees. When we're talking to Siri on an Apple iPhone, it is looking at the meaning or the the words. I say looking at, analyzing, and making modifications to say, oh, this sound means is this. But it is a very, very broad term when you say artificial intelligence. And I think we're going to see a whole lot more of that. I've been having a lot of fun with ChatGPT lately and seeing if I can trick it or get it to give me answers that are incorrect, which I like I asked it about, I put this on LinkedIn, I think. I said, what is the future of intralogistics in the United States? And it gave me a big paragraph, but it was really, really rosy and happy and didn't indicate any supply chain issues, didn't indicate that there was a downturn or a recession right now, didn't indicate that there had been $1 billion worth of warehouse plans that had been drawn out, drawn back, halted. It was very, very happy, rosy, everything's great. So I disagreed with that. But nonetheless, it's AI in the sense that it's using a computer to look for patterns and to make decisions on that. I think, again, it gets back to, you got to have your strategy right first. So you asked the question, let me make sure I didn't miss this. You said, what does someone do to get started? There's a progression, and there are a number of companies out there, good consulting companies, that can help anyone get down the journey of through how to digitalize. But you have to have the goal in mind at the beginning. That's my big thing. Otherwise, you're just, let's get technology for technology's sake. And that's always a disaster, I think.
Yeah. Yep. You've got all this tech, but it's not working for you. I totally get it. It's like having a nice sports car in the garage and never driving it, and not even looking at it. So it makes all the sense in the world. And Craig, I appreciate you walking us through that broad spectrum there. Certainly amazing technology that's being implemented now that you're working on from the bleeding edge, kind of this predictive analysis of being able to stock different centers and warehouses, and using all the different technology to do so. And then, of course, you run into the person who's running a business, in Detroit, and they haven't automated, but they know they need to, just don't know where to start. There's plenty of ways for them to seek that information. And companies like Siemens and other integrators and consultancies are out there ready to help educate and help move people along to get started into that spectrum. And eventually, who knows, maybe we're in the bleeding edge sooner than we thought possible. So Craig, I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining in and sharing your insight. It's always exciting to see what Siemens is up to, and really love what you guys have done with the Intralogistics vertical and where y'all are taking things now. Until next time, thanks again.